Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam, Trilokyam Sacharacharam, Atpadam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva, Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva, Tvameva Vedyad Ravinam Tvameva, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Guru. Yata sarvani bhutani pratibhanti stithani cha yatraivo pashamam yanti tasmai satyatmane namaha. So Mark, can you refresh us as to where we are in the text?
We're on Shloka 17 on page 163.
Are you there with us, Ganesh? Yeah. There we are. Shloka 16. Did you say which shloka?
17-18.
17-18.
Eva muktva munau yate raja swayam achintayat dehatram aham nasmi hastapadadya chetanam karmendriyani naivaham acha karmendriyani me jadanyata swarupani acha buddhindriyanyaham. Having said thus, when the sage was gone, the king reflected within himself, I am not the mere body which consists of hands, feet, and the like, is insentient. I am also not the organs of action, mouth, hand, legs, and the generative and excretory organs, nor do the organs of action belong to me, who have the nature of being consciousness. I am not also the organs of perception, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin, which are insentient and of unreal nature.
So what the scripture is going through now is our classic meditation in Atma, Anatma, Vivechanam, the discrimination between the self and the not self. It's the foundational meditation. So he starts with the body. I am not the body. It's got parts, etc. It's not me. What I like to do is give people awareness that we actually know the body and its changes. When you were a child, you had a little body, you went through adolescence, now you're an adult. Some of us are middle-aged or further. The body continues to change, but I am the knower of the body and its changes. I am not the body. And he goes to the sense organs themselves. We have 10 indriyas, sense organs, the organs of action, the organs of knowledge. First, he does the organs of action, hands, feet, tongue, anus, and genitals. I am aware of their activity, energy out. Then he goes to the organs of knowledge, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin, and all the perceptions that I get through those. I am aware of them. They are not in and of themselves the subject, the illuminator, the knower. Going on.
Naham evam shariradi shishtam alokayamyaham shesho vikalpahino hi vishuddhachit aham tatah sarva bhavagata sukshma bhava bhava vivarjita sa eva bhagavan atma tantur mukta svivasthitah. And thus not the body and the like. I shall consider what is left. The remainder is indeed bereft of doubt or variety. Therefore I am the pure consciousness that is contained in all thoughts, subtle and destitute of existence and non-existence. He alone, the self and the God, exists just as the thread exists within a row of pearls.
Such just as a what exists, a thread exists?
Yeah, within a row of pearls.
Okay. So I suspect, because this is an abridgment, several verses have been left out, such that he sees that he's not only not the body and all its experiences, but he's not the feelings, he's not the thoughts, he's not even the darkness of deep sleep. What am I? What's left over? What is non-negatable is consciousness. What is the nature of that in a mind made very still, with the attentive faculty turned inward? See if you can notice in the space between your thoughts. Who am I? And again, this text uses one of my favorite expressions for it, Chid Akasha, the space of consciousness alone. There's nothing there. So again, this text, we deal with three questions. Who am I? What is this world? How has it come about? So in this particular story, we're dealing with that first question. Who am I? What is my essential nature? Going on.
Iti jnatva kiratesho lebhe padam anuttamam vivekadhya vasayena brahmanyam ivagadhijah. Thus, having known, the king of the Kiratas obtained the highest abode or position, just as the son of Gadhi, or Rishi Vishwamitra, obtained Brahmanahood by discerning mental effort.
So the king realizes his self nature. And scriptures have all these things. You've achieved that which is to be achieved. You've glorified your clan. You've done all there is to do. This is the summum bonum of life. Going on.
Parighena Samvadaha. The conversation with Parigha. Babhuva Parasikana Parigho Nama Parthiva Sababhuva Param Mitram Suragho Asya Bhupate. There was a king of the Parisikas, Persians by name, Parikha. He was a great friend of this king, Suraghu.
So this guy, Suraghu, has another king who's a friend. Let's see what happens as these two guys hang out together. Going on.
Kadachit Jata Durbhiksham Rajyam Tyaktva Vanam Gatah Bhakshayan Shushka Parnani Parnada Parighasmritah. At one time, he went to the forest, having left the country in which famine had occurred. Eating dry leaves, Parigha was remembered as a leaf eater.
So there's a famine, and the king leaves the country, goes into the forest and eats leaves. Going on.
Tato Varshasahasrena Tapasa Darunatmana Abhyasavashatat Prapat Jnanam Atma Prasadajam. Then in 1,000 years, by austerity which was hard or intense in character, he obtained knowledge born of tranquility of the mind through the power of spiritual practice.
Yes. So again, when we say 1,000 years, this is a literary device. It means just for a very long time. So he does spiritual practices. He gains tranquility. So the mind is necessary for our worry and suffering and regret and fear. It is not necessary for peace. We prove it every night with deep sleep. So the yogi, rather than playing whack-a-mole with the world, more, better, different, more, better, different, more, better, different, which at best gives temporary respite, continues to let go, go, go. Therefore, has a tranquil, peaceful mind. Any thoughts on this? Next one.
Ekada Parigha Prapa Savanam Suragho Muda Te Tatra Praktane Mitre Anyonyam Idamu Chatuhu. Once Parigha went to the palace of Suraghu with joy. There the two friends spoke this to one another.
So, the one king ends up in the palace of his friend. Going on.
Parighawacha. Parigha said, Jnanam etat maya praptam maya jnanam yatha pura kanchit karoshi samaya suprasanna gabhiraya drishtya subhagakaryani karmanyeva taradhipa apattaram maniyecha kanchit bhogena sajjasi kanchinno pashamam shreyah samadhim anutisthasi. This knowledge has been obtained by me just as knowledge was obtained formerly by you. King, I hope you do with equal vision, which is clear and deep, only actions which have a blessed motive. I also hope that you're not attached to enjoyments which are pleasant only until they cause your downfall, or only for the passing moment. Further, I hope that you practice absorption in absolute consciousness or samadhi, which is tranquility and supreme felicity.
So, as the result of his particular spiritual experience doing austerities in the forest, he goes and sees his buddy and says, I've got what you've got now. But I just hope you're not going to fall off the wagon and become an extrovert, start dancing with the objects. And I hope you spend time in samadhi, reveling in the self. So he's got some ideas about how the man of wisdom functions in the world. There's still some subtle ideas about control, attainment, stuff like that. Let's see what happens.
Surakha Surakhu said, Nitya Prabuddhachit Tattva Kurvantopi Jagat Kriyaha Atmai Katatpasannishta Sadaiva Susamadhayah Tappa Babodho Bhagavan Sarva Shatrana Pavakah Prokta Samadhi Shabdena Chatushnim Avasthiti. On account of an ever awakened intellect, even though performing worldly activities, those who are greatly devoted to, but resting on the one true principle of the self, are only profoundly absorbed in absolute consciousness or samadhi always. Revered one, perception of truth or ultimate reality, which is the fire that destroys the straw of every desire, is spoken of by the word samadhi and not remaining in silence.
Yes. So we always talk about samadhi as a mind state and as another name for yourself. Samadhi is the mind state of no mind, the mind deeply absorbed in the self. It has great value at one particular level of our practice, because the bliss of samadhi is what ultimately pulls the mind out of the world. And for some of us, for most of us, the subtle intellect just won't let go of identification with that personal sense of self until it's just gone. And when the mind returns, grasp its complete unreality. But that's not the highest state. Higher than nirvikalpa samadhi is what we call sahaja samadhi, natural or continuous samadhi. Point being is, what do you ever not do? And if you firmly know the nature of that eyes into the disappearing of mind states, makes no difference at all. And if you fundamentally grasp the unreality of the mind itself and the whole phenomenal world, then action, thinking is not problematic. not confident. Just like if you go into the bathroom and it's a foggy, there's a mist on the mirror from the shower, you turn on the fan or wipe the mirror and you see your face. That's what I look like. When you walk out of the bathroom, your face doesn't disappear, nor do you need to go around carrying a hand mirror to make sure your face doesn't fall off. So also, if you really get it, when you ever not you. Any thoughts on this? If we don't get this, we'll be grasping after mind states continually. Then getting whacked out in samadhis becomes a new object of desire. Going on.
Ashuddha Nirahankara Tvandveshvannanu Papini Nischinta Vigata Bhishta Heyopadeya Varjita Prokta Samadhishabdhena Paripurna Manogati. That state of mind which is quite full, but totally contented, not agitated, free from egotism, not alighting upon the pairs of opposites such as pleasure and pain in succession, free from anxiety, devoid of objects of desire and destitute of consideration of things fit to be abandoned or fit to be acquired, is spoken of by the word samadhi.
Yes. Or to summarize this list, when all our struggles cease, there's no more goals. Then you have contentment, santosha, supreme peace, paramashanti. Now, the desire to meditate may arise, fine, just like the desire to have pizza. But it's no longer something serious. It's not going to add to your knowledge of the self. Have we gone? I think we've passed through the chapter with the 7 stages of ignorance and the 7 stages of knowledge, haven't we?
Yes, we did.
Okay, so in the 7 stages of knowledge, the 4th stage states realization of yourself. And Ramana Maharshi was once asked by a disciple, which of the stages of knowledge does the Jivan Mukta belong to, the liberated soul? And Bhagawan said, the 4th stage. And the disciple then asked, then why have 3 more superior to it been enumerated by the scripture? It's a fabulous answer. And what he says is, these are not stages of bondage and release. These have to do with the experiences of the realized soul. And they are not to be acquired by mere will or effort. In fact, if you're making efforts, you're not even at the 4th stage yet. The mark of the man of wisdom is he no longer is jonesing, craving, striving. He knows where happiness is. Happiness is the freedom from that vikshepa shakti. So it has to do with punya, with merits accrued in prior lives. How deeply the mind dissolves into the self, and how diaphanous or ephemeral the phenomenal world appears experientially. Any thoughts on this? Now, in Tripura Rahasya, there's a story about a king and his wife gets enlightened and he goes off to the forest to do ritual. And then it says something that's so very typical of the Sanskrit language. It says, the desire to acquire cities arose in her. It doesn't say she decided that she was going to get cities and be powerful. Now, the cities become a literary device. But the point being, oh, she just felt like doing these practices to get cities. So note what I'm saying is not an injunction, quit meditating. Do what you feel, what you're intuitively led. So you don't feel like doing it anymore. It's just part of the picture show. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Parighena Sambhadaha. The conversation with Parigha Parigha said, Rajan Nunam Prabuddhosi Praptavanasi Tatpadam Samshilanta Karano Samshilanta Karanaha Gatahankara Vikalpaha Samshilanta Karanaha Agatahankara Vikalpaha. King, you're certainly awakened or enlightened. You have reached the abode of that reality with your heart or mind extremely cool or tranquil and devoid of the affliction of egotism.
So he says, you are certainly a realized soul, a liberated soul. Let's see what the next part of it is. And he's going to qualify this. Going on.
Suraghu Parighashchaiva Vicharyaivam Jagadbhamam Mitha Prapujito Tushto Swavyapara Parogato. Suraghu and Parigha, thus having investigated the delusion of the world of worldly existence, were gratified and honored one another. Then they departed, intent on their occupations.
Yes. So, what's the right way for the man of wisdom to behave? There is no right way. It's all prarabdha, force of the past maturing, each fulfilling his role in the play of this world. So they acknowledge the depth of one another and in their own ways. Any thoughts about this interaction? Going on.
Swapna Samudharanam, lifting up one's own self. Yo Yagyatmayo Nityam Nityam Antarmukha Sukhi Nityam Chidarusandhanaha Sana Shokena Bhathyate. He who is ever full of the Supreme Self or engaged in the meditation of the Self, who always looks within and is happy, and who always inquires into or contemplates on the pure consciousness, is never oppressed by sorrow.
Yes. So, for the mumukshu, the one who's a seeker after liberation, who is earnestly engaged in self-inquiry, and has mature dispassion, does his duty in the world, but doesn't take it all very seriously. Even before knowledge dawns in the mind, we're freed from great sorrow. Krishna says this in Gita, even a little of this knowledge frees us from great sorrow, great fear. So here the scripture is talking about the ancillary benefits of living our lives as we go. How much tapas, how much practice we need to do before steady wisdom dawns on the mind? That's a mystery. Some of us come in with just a little bit of dust. Others, there's some heavy slogging. We can only work with the material that we have. Going on.
Yasmin deshe girau tajñau nasti sajjana padapah sadhana shitala chayo tatra nivaset buddha. In whichever country or mountain, the knower of that reality, who is the tree of the virtuous man, bearing fruit and with cool shade, does not exit. There let not a wise man dwell. Note, the comparison of the country with the mountain in the above verse is obvious. Just as one should not resort to a mountain devoid of trees, bearing fruit and providing shade, a wise man does not live in a country where there is no self-realized person who can bestow the fruit of knowledge and the cool shade of tranquility.
So, what he's echoing here is what the whole first section of Tripura Rahasyam says. The root cause of liberation is association with the wise. If we have the great punya, the great merit, to be able to have a personal relationship with a man or woman of wisdom, oh, it makes everything different. It's everything different. But it's also possible through our own self-effort to make great progress. Swamiji always used to say that the external guru is a temporary psychological device. It's a temporary externalization of our own innate wisdom. When you find out who you are, you'll find out who the Guru is, and vice versa. But we're very lucky. We're very lucky. Since the 60s, many, many men and women of wisdom have come to the States. We have second and third generation gifts from those trees dropping their fruit, new plants. Next verse.
Na dhanani, na mitrani, na shastrani, na bandhavaha, naranan upakurvanti, magnasvat masamudhrituh, magnasvatma samudhratu. Neither riches nor friends, nor scriptures nor relatives help men in lifting up or saving one's own self that is sunk.
So now he's going to speak to what we call Purushartha or Paurusham, which is our own self-effort. Again, in Gita, Krishna says, man raises himself by himself into the self. The Guru is at best a midwife or a gardener. We must do the work. Going on.
Mano matrena mitrena sadeva sahavasina sahakinchit param rishya avatyatma samudhritaha. Having rubbed or reflected a little with the mere mind which is a friend and always a fellow dweller, the self becomes uplifted or saved.
Having rubbed.
Yeah. Maybe you can say having reflected a little with the mere mind.
Well, I think the metaphor he's using is like sandalwood. Again, that part of it may be missing because it's an abridgment. But when they are harvesting the sandalwood trees, they cut them down in the sandalwood forests, and then they usually take them to a river. And then they float them downstream to wherever they're going to be milled and then carved into various ornaments or idols or things like that. But when the sandalwood soaks in the river for a time, the outer layer and the bark starts to rot, and it stings to high heaven. So it's a classic metaphor. That's you and me, covered by our stinking vasanas. So just like the mill workers scrape the wet, soggy wood off till we get the clear, hard sandalwood underneath that's in good condition. So you and I have to rub the detritus of our vulgarities away. And then we don't need to do an additional practice to get or acquire the self. Metaphor I like to use, I like to watch these like History Channel shows where they find sunken treasure, like the Atocha. That's one of the famous Spanish galleons that sank. And they bring up this kind of lumpy thing that's kind of cross-shaped. And it's all covered with barnacles. So they have to be very careful, and they bathe it in special stuff to get the barnacles off. And underneath is this gorgeous silver cross studded with precious gems. So you don't have to take the barnacles off, then go through another process to get the valuable cross. No, all you got to do is remove the incrustations. So also, all of our yoga is just removing the incrustations. And what's left over is myself. As clear and as obvious as a piece of fruit in your hand. So if I still have doubts, I still have a sense of egoism, don't go hunting for the self, especially if you've had some glimpses of you know who you are. Abhyasa Vairagya Ch. Practice, continue deep meditation. Renounce. So what do we renounce? Shankara defines vairagya, that desire to give up all attachments to enjoyments gained through the sense objects and any idea of self, starting with the body up to and including the form of Brahma, the creator. It's the two. Over and over again, let it go. Next one.
Anohankara vilaye sarvabhavantarasthita samudeti parananda yatana parameshwari. On the dissolution of the mind and egotism, there arises that great delight, which is a manifestation of the Supreme Being, existing within all objects or living creatures.
So on the dissolution of the mind, the destruction of the mind, the dissolving of the mind. Swamiji used to say, when the last thought is thoughted. Now, one of the expressions the scriptures use, as well as, was it manonasha that was used here? What did he use for dissolving?
Manohankara vilaya, laya.
Laya, vilaya though.
Yeah, vilaya.
Extreme dissolution, yeah. Mano, ahankara, manas, mind, ahankara, ego, completely dissolved. But there's also tanu manasaha, the thinning of. For many of us, that's enough. Again, that's karmic, whether you have deep, deep samadhis or not. But keep thinning. Just like lace curtains. If you look through lace curtains, you can see what's happening on the street. You don't have to open the curtains, just the lace curtains. You can still see. Maybe not quite as clearly, but you can see. All right, next one.
Sasvayam yoga samsiddha parama vigatopama nagamya vachasam rama khe vehanubhuyate. Rama, the most excellent state devoid of comparison, itself fully accomplished or perfected by yoga, is not approachable by words. It is experienced here, only in the heart or the inmost being of a person.
So it is not figure outable. You won't find it from listening to YouTube. Only in our own hearts. What's our spiritual heart? It's when the intellect is absolutely quiet and the mind is given up all struggle. That's what we call the Hridaya, our spiritual
Would you repeat that, Jim?
when the intellect is completely quiet, when thought is completely reduced, and the struggling, the yearning, the striving of the mind has ceased. So they, in essence, just become merged. What's left is just pure awareness. It's as if it were like the ocean and all the waves just go. Now, it is achieved through yoga. It's achieved through jnana. This text gives equal weight to both paths. But there are those people who will study the Eightfold Path of yoga and they will huff and puff and do the pranayama and all that sort of stuff. But when they finish their practice, they come out into the world and their heart is still full of desires. And then when they do these bandhas, these locks and things like that with their pranayama, the experience, we were mentioning this earlier, you get this jada samadhi, it's called. Jada means inert. I see nothing. Why? Because there's still vasana. So we have to do the intense renunciation. That makes the practice fruitful. It's like the snake and the rope. Yeah, I want to realize the snake and I keep seeing the rope. I want to realize the rope and I keep seeing the snake. I want to realize that rope, but boy, do I like smooching the snake. All next one.
इति श्री वासिष्ठ संग्रहे सुरघुपाख्यानम नाम षोडश सर्गः. Thus ends the 16th chapter titled The Story of Suraghu in the abridgment of Yogavasishtha.
Yeah, I think this one was heavily abridged. All right, going on, let's start the next chapter.
Saptadasha Sargah, chapter 17. Manonasha Prakaraha.
Ah, yes, Manonasha.
The manner of destruction of the mind.
Now, when we say Manonasha, this doesn't mean like a frontal lobotomy. It's not like you're drooling in your diaper someplace. Yogavasishtha will reduce the mind to three ideas. I think I'm a person, I've got a goal, and I make efforts toward it. That's the mind. That's what needs to be destroyed. So let's see how that's approached in this chapter. Going on.
Bhasa Vilasa Samvada. Conversation between Bhasa and Vilasa. Vasishtha Ch. Vasishtha said, Manasaiva Mana Chitva Yadatma Navalokyate Nastam Iti Jagad Dukkham Manaschede Sukhat Madhi. If the self is not perceived by destroying the mind with the mind itself, the sorrow of the world does not set or vanish. From the annihilation of the mind, there is the knowledge of the blissful self.
So we need to destroy the mind, not with hypodermic needles, not with large hammers. We destroy the mind by the mind. Meaning, the mind itself grasps its own unreality. Going on.
Suhridoratra samvadam shruno bhasa vilasayoh pura sahyagire sano tapaso dvau pabhatuh tapaso dvau pabhuvatuh. In this matter, listen to the conversation between the friends Bhasa and Vilasa. In former times, there were two ascetics in the forest of the Sahya mountain.
So these are two ascetics, two monastics, running around in the forest, living as hermits. Going on.
Astam anyonya sustridhau tayorapyatma javubhu vilasa bhasanamano samam asit tayo manah. They were very much attached to one another. They also had two sons by name Bhasa and Vilasa. Their minds were identical.
So these two ascetics have two sons. Guess what they must have done prior to times? Going on.
Mritau tu pitarau drishtva chakrate paridevanam tatastau tapasa kalam shepayamasutu prathak Shepayamasatu prathak. Having seen their fathers dead, they lamented. Then they passed their time separately by religious austerity.
So these two sons see their fathers croak. And then they grieve, they do the rites, and they kind of go their own ways and do their own austerities. Going on.
Ekada sangatau taucha Shevamanyonya muchatuhu Vilasau vacha Vadakwa Shapita kala Kanchitte saphalam tapah Kanchitte vidvara buddhi Kanchit kushalavan asi. Once they met together and spoke to one another thus. Vilasa said, "Tell me, where was time spent by you? I hope your penance was fruitful. I trust your perception is free from anxiety. I hope you're doing well, are happy."
So Vilasa says to Bhasa is his name?
Bhasa.
Hope you're doing well. Let's see what happens.
Bhasa uvacha. Bhasa said, "Kushalam tu katosmakam samsare tishthatam iha yavat nabhigatam nyayam yavat shinana chitta bhuh." yavattirno na sansarah tavat na kushalam kutah. Whence is happiness for us remaining in this worldly existence? As long as what is fit to be known is not known, as long as the field of thought or the field of the perceived is not destroyed, as long as the course of worldly life is not crossed, so long where is happiness for us?
So his response is an interesting one. He articulates the thoughts of mature Vairagya. This world is vanity. What's the point of it all? Without knowledge of the self, it's just sorrow upon sorrow upon sorrow. Going on.
Yavat na bhyudito bodha tavat na kushalam kutah evam tau kushala prashnam kritavantau parasparam kalena vimalam jnanam labdhva moksham avapatuhu. As long as knowledge has not risen, so long where is happiness for us? Thus making friendly inquiry after the welfare of one another, to obtain liberation, having gained clear knowledge in course of time.
So again, we're missing a lot of the abridged material, but they continue their tapas and they attain liberation. Let's see what happens next.
Ato vachmi mahabaho yatha jnane taragati sansara tarane nasti sangavadhasya chetasah asaktam nirmalam chittam muktam samsaryapi sphutam saktam dirghatapo yuktam api buddham saktam dirghatapo yuktam api buddham bhavediha. Mighty armed one, so I tell you that there is no means other than knowledge for crossing the course of worldly life with a mind bound by attachment. The stainless mind free from attachment is certainly liberated, though a creature of worldly existence. The mind which is attached becomes bound here, though endowed with austerity of long duration.
So, as long as knowledge does not dawn on the mind, even if you reduce your toys to a minimum, there will still be attachment. How do I achieve this manonasha? How do I achieve real mature vairagya? Let's see what happens. This is Vasishtha talking to Rama. He calls him Mahabaho, strong arm one.
Sansakti, close attachment. Sri Rama Uvacha, Sri Rama said, Kidrisho Bhagavan Sango Nranam Bandhaya Kidrishaha Kidrisho Vapi Mokshaya Katham Chaisha Chikitsyate. Revered sage, of what nature is attachment? Of what sort is it that causes the bondage of men? Of what sort is it that causes liberation? And how is this cured?
So what really is our attachment? Do I get to like spicy food? Do I have to just sit at home and do nothing? Am I allowed to enjoy my work? Can I enjoy my friends, my spouse? I have to walk away from it all? It's a good question. Let's see what the answer is going on.
Vasishtha Uvacha, Vasishtha said, Deha Dehi Vibhagaika Parityagena Bhavanat Dehamatre tu vishvasaha sango bandharham uchyate. By the sole repudiation of the division between the body and the embodied, or the soul, on account of supposition or conception, the faith in the mere body is called attachment deserving of bondage.
So the bija vasana, the seed or root attachment, all of the structures of ego, is the deeply rooted conviction I am the body. This is the principal attachment to be broken. Over and over and over again, we have to analyze it, let go, let go. I am not the body. The concerns of the body are irrelevant. Give them up. Do what is necessary, take a bath, go to work, eat, etc. Give up. Yogavasishtha, attachment to the body itself. Most of us think, oh, I have such subtle attachments. Oh, you know, yeah. Root of it all is I think I'm the body. Any thoughts on this? Going on.
Atmaiva khalvidam sarvam kim grinhami tyajami kim itya sangasthitiam vidhi jivan muktatva muthitam. All this is indeed the self only. What do I take? What do I give up? No such a state of non-attachment as the lofty nature of the liberated while living.
So the view of the world is it's all the Lord. There's nothing that I need to take up, nothing I need to let go. Back to the prior verse. Let me just share with you what happened in the ashram in Mumbai when I went there in '93. So it was the beginning of the 2.5-year brahmachari training course. So people come from all different walks of life, mostly very young people. And for all the guys, the first thing that happens is you get your hair shaved off, except for a little tuft in the back called a choti. You give up all your clothing. You wear a dhoti and a kurta, white. You live in a cell, literally. Concrete block dormitories. Metal frame bed with a cot mattress that's about 2 inches thick. A metal desk and a metal chair and a dresser and a lamp and a rubber bucket. And you live out of a rubber bucket. You wash your clothes in the rubber bucket. You bathe yourself in the rubber bucket. You wash your room in the rubber bucket. The idea is to remove all of the vanities. No books other than the scriptures we're studying, no radio, no television, no iPhones. Of course, they didn't exist back in those days. So that the mind can more easily turn in. and people can still get attached. In the Catholic monastic tradition, you're warned against forming what are called particular friendships. It's very easy to find a best friend. Glom on to that. Everybody. It's much harder to do that in the world. But it's what we must do. This intense spirit of hierarchy. Next verse.
Nabhinandati naishkarmyam na karma swanurudhyate susamo yah phalatyage so sansakta iti smritah. One who does not rejoice in inactivity, nor is bound to actions, who is thoroughly even in his outlook, and who gives up the desire for the fruits of action, he is regarded as unattached.
So you're willing to do anything. You're willing to not do anything. Giving up all ego-prompted desire. I'll be happy when, it'll be better if. This equanimity of mind. Gita calls it samadrishna, this quality of vision. And this is not only the mark of the Jivan Mukta, the Sthita Prajna Purusha, but it's a practice for us to work. To destroy the mind and its yearnings, its tyrannies. One more.
Asam sangena sarvascha chekha nana vijrumbhitaah chikitsata bhavantyeva shreyasampadyanti cha. By non-attachment, all our actions manifested in various ways become cured. By non-attachment, all actions manifested in various ways become cured or their binding influence and produce good.
So, when you have no investment in the outcome, no attachment to the fruit of the actions, then all impurities start to burn away. And the actions you do perform become a blessing. So this part of the scripture is stressing again. Abhyasa Vairagyacha. Practice tends letting go, tends non-attach. And in the beginning, the mind goes, well, I don't have my toys. But afterward, there's just great, great peace. Okay, we'll end here tonight. What verse are we on for next week?
We will do 16, 17 next week.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Namaha. Hari Om. Om. Thank you all. We all renounced the class. They left.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Jim. Good night.
Is that David?
Yes, hello.